And as we discuss the violence in Mobile, we are joined this morning by Mobile Police Chief Paul Prine to talk a little bit about what's happening, but also what we can do, because that's what everybody is focused on right now. Good morning, and thank you for being here.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
It seems like we're talking a lot about shootings happening in Mobile, and a lot recently about younger victims, and even younger people pulling the trigger.
Well, we are, and I think you're seeing an uptick in that, and it's not just locally here. We're seeing that nationwide as well, but we certainly need to get a handle on it.
Okay, so I know the police department is working actively to solve these crimes and do all of these things. I mean, people are under arrest for these different things, but it would be a community effort for this, right?
Sarah, you know, what we've always said is it takes all of us to get involved and to prevent crime. Law enforcement's main responsibility is to intervene, prevent, and certainly to enforce the law. But it can't just be solely on the backs of the police department. It takes the prosecutor's office, it takes the judicial system, and it certainly takes the community as well.
So what does the community need to do? Do we need to be reporting things when we see them? What active role are we asking of the community?
Well, I think there's two things. When you look at offenders and you look at between the ages of 15 and 25, which is our offender demographics, a lot of these are young teens. They're perpetrating these crimes, and so what we would ask the community is for the families to be involved. Know where your children at 11 or 12 o'clock at night. Know what they're doing on their phones. Know what's in their backpacks. Be involved in their lives. It really does make a difference. The other part of that, I would say, is that the community needs to be aware of what's going on in the community. When they see something in the community, when you see people riding around that don't belong in an area, or you see them with weapons, in many cases, sometimes the perpetrators will walk down the street and they have these guns in their hands. If you see something that does not look right, call the authorities and let us come and look into it.
One of the situations that we've been talking about this morning that has just happened is we talked about someone having a criminal record, but things didn't go forward because the complainant didn't sign the complaint, didn't go through with it. There's something to be said for that as well, right?
Well, there is, and I think what's important to know when we're investigating these shootings, and so far in Mobile, our homicides are up year to date, as well as our shooting intos. But we have to also understand that behind that, when we go and respond to an incident, we are investigating that to bring it to a resolution. If our victims are not cooperating, there's very little we can do. The question is, why are the victims not cooperating? And I think it also could be asked is, are they complicit in the crime themselves?
So there's some concern there when it comes to investigating. We have to have people follow through the whole process.
Absolutely, and it's important for not only victims but for witnesses, not only to come forward initially, but also to follow that process through to the end when that case is heard in court.
And it could be a little scary, perhaps, for someone who sees something to follow through with that, right? What advice would you give to those people?
Well, you know, I know there's some concerns about retaliation. That will always be a concern. But the community's got to be tired of being tired. The police department is doing everything that it knows to do. There is not one solution that's going to solve the crime problem in Mobile or nationwide. If there was one solution, somebody would have already found that solution. The problem is very complex. Crime is very complex, and it's caused by a variety of problems, and it takes a variety of solutions to be able to deal with it and bring it to a close.
And one of the things you just mentioned is 15 to 25 or so. That is our age group of some of these offenders. That feels young.
Well, it's very young, but it, incidentally, it's also our victims' age demographics as well. So you can see the correlation between the victims and our offenders, and that's where we're having most of our problems.
And what we've been talking about too this morning in some of these last two cases, these last two situations, the victims were in the wrong place at the wrong time?
Yeah, so when we talk about Mr. Morzette, you know, he was 11 years old. He was simply gunned down for doing what an 11-year-old does inside his home, playing and doing whatever an 11-year-old does, getting ready for the summertime. Sierra Jackson, 15 years old, she was gunned down in a car simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Both of these young victims are simply victims in every sense of the word.
And you were able to find the people responsible in these two cases through investigation, but also through people coming forward, right?
Right. So it's important that when we make cases, it's because of community involvement and people giving tips and coming forward with information. But it's also important to follow that all the way through the court system. Unfortunately, sometimes there's a backlog in the court system, and as time progresses and goes through the next 2 or 3 years, whatever it takes to get that case in court, we find ourselves sometimes where victims or witnesses end up reconciling with the offenders, and it makes it very difficult to prosecute.
So a lot of different aspects going into this. The police actively, obviously, working on this. So the community needs to get involved as well. Chief, thanks so much for being here today and for talking to us about this. Something that we will be continuing to hopefully have open discussions on.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?